Hello, guys and gals, me Mudahar, and one of my favorite types of content on the internet is watching people do like these massive video game like retrospectives or coverages or these video essays. And for me, one of the things that I've been working on is Assassin's Creed 2. Now, ladies and gentlemen, to give you an idea about it, I've made plenty of videos regarding Ubisoft, and more specifically their recent downward trend, but it's not coming out of a place of just hatred for Ubisoft. You know, for a lot of people, hating on a company might be incredibly trendy, and sure, for Ubisoft, they're the easiest company to hate right now, but for me, as somebody that's played a whole bunch of their IPs, like Splinter Cell Chaos Theory, just as an example, you got the Prince of Persia franchise on the PlayStation 2, Ghost Recon is an absolutely amazing franchise they've worked on. I mean, there are so many W's that Ubisoft has stacked over the course of their lifespan that to see them self-immolate in the last few years has been just some of the most damaging shit that I've actually seen. And unfortunately, a company as large as Ubisoft actually holds so many of the favorite IPs that I have, like Splinter Cell, completely hostage. And the reality is, it's not always been this way. Ubisoft, for me, has been a company as influential in gaming as, companies like Konami with Metal Gear. They have produced really amazing titles, and there are development teams that they have that, in my opinion, are pretty much up there with some of the best in the industry. There was a time when this company absolutely made its mark on the map and became the company that it was today. So to give you a quick idea about it, a lot of people dislike the open world Ubisoft design, right? Where there's just one map screen, towers to unlock, just darts and collectibles, like things on a checklist for you to complete. In a lot of ways, one could open up a map for most modern-day Ubisoft open-world games and effectively find themselves completely overwhelmed with tons of content to do. But the thing about it is, for a company like Ubisoft to get as big as they did, it's not like it happened out of nowhere. Obviously, there had to be one point in their game development where something clicked so well with the average gamer that they kept this going until 2024. Now, Assassin's Creed is one of those game franchises that comes out pretty much every year, and nowadays there's a whole MCU-level intro where they go through an entire history of Assassin's Creed titles, where it's kind of mind-boggling that this series has been running for about 15 plus years at this point, and they've gotten so many mainline games, comics, ARGs, whole movies, entire online side content that you can go through, mobile games, so on and so forth. Assassin's Creed probably has more media in it than most other game franchises out there at the moment. So it's kind of wild when you actually dig into its core and come across the first actual beginning of the series, right? Now, when I was young, when I was far younger and the Xbox 360 was a newer system, one of the first games that I was really hyped for was Assassin's Creed 1. And I remember very early on looking at Assassin's Creed 1's E3 footage. Now, Assassin's Creed 1, one of the first demonstrations that I ever saw about this game was at Microsoft's X06, their actual demonstration. And it actually blew me away back in the day. This game was supposed to be a spiritual successor to the Prince of Persia franchise. And it was this open world game where parkour was a thing. There really wasn't any HUD, and you were moving around this pretty realistic environment. I mean, at the time, you look at textures like this, you look at the animation quality, you look at the world, you look at the people walking around, it actually is mind-bogglingly awesome, right? There wasn't really a game like this. To give you an idea, when I was playing video games in this era, I played games like Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, where the hands and fingers stuck to each other, okay? People had Roblox hands back in those days. Straight up boulders for fists. And then you suddenly move into games where the lighting looks absolutely jaw-dropping. Even to this day, you've got animation quality, cloth quality, everything is absolutely amazing, right? You've got 3 entire cities in the original Assassin's Creed to explore, find your targets, and basically lay waste to them. Now, this game actually hasn't aged all that well, and out of any replay that I do, I usually skip the first Assassin's Creed game, just because it is not the best playing one. The assassinations are actually cool moments where the game will pitch you up against the target, and you have to actually go and find them, figure out a plan to attack them as they're in this crowded environment, and then as you kill them, you have to escape, or maybe fight off a few individuals, fight off an entire army at times, but generally speaking, the in-betweens where you're traversing to these cities, actually doing the prep work, which basically amounts to a couple different styles of gameplay. Either you're pickpocketing, you're eavesdropping on people, or doing absolutely mundane tasks. This game has not aged all that well, but realistically, for a first attempt at something, the technology was there, the world was exciting. It was a sci-fi game where you played as a dude named Desmond Miles, okay? A bartender that gets thrown into a fucking device where they strap them in and send them looking through their ancestors' memories, okay? Through some sci-fi Animus level stuff. You know, these kind of concepts in video games were pretty new at the time, alright? You just wanted something to be wild and goofy, and I played along with it. I played with the modern day story until they absolutely fucked it up by the third game, and ever since then, it's basically this crazy afterthought. I don't know who's writing any of this stuff anymore. I honestly don't even think they care about who's writing the Assassin's Creed storyline in general. But back then, this sci-fi concept really did grip me in, and it wasn't until the sequel with Assassin's Creed 2 that it absolutely hit its stride. Now, to give an idea, this is a kind of game franchise in an era where you could find April Fool's jokes like this, right? Like, I shit you not, the Assassin's Creed team in Ubisoft was so cool. They were working with Hideo Kojima, like, literally with every release, and they had, like, some level of interactivity with them. So as somebody that's a fan of the Metal Gear franchise, you bet your ass that when I saw Raiden in Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, I almost came in my pants. I actually did all of the mundane tasks to get that actual item in the game. Now, Assassin's Creed 2 paved the way for the company they are today, and the direction almost every single one of their games, especially the open world stuff goes, is all tied back to Assassin's Creed 2. Now, Assassin's Creed 2 is probably, in my opinion, the greatest sequel to any video game you could ever imagine. Usually with sequels, it's your time, especially if you're making a new IP, to finally hit your stride, go big, or go home, alright? With Assassin's Creed 1, they laid the foundations for what is one of the more technically impressive games on the Xbox 360, and still to this day, put itself on the map. So how do you go from having these day-night cycles, these 3 totally realistic-looking cities at the time with tons of NPCs and an amazing immersive world, and decide to actually one-up that? Well, this is where Assassin's Creed 2 comes in. Now, when I first saw the actual reveals for this, to know that it was set in the Italian Renaissance was actually an exciting moment, because there's not really a whole lot of games set in that time period, and obviously Assassin's Creed 2 is willing to play kind of loose with its historical accuracy. These games are set in environments where they try to match the people, the world as best they can, but if you're into the Assassin's Creed world, one thing you have to understand about the story is it's very sci-fi oriented. Assassin's Creed 2 introduces and more focuses on the actual conflict between the two groups, the Assassins and the Templars, these shadowy organizations. Now, these two shadowy organizations are constantly at odds with each other, okay? Fighting in the shadows, the Assassins want to give humanity freedom and their free will to choose, and the Templars actually crave order, and they want to basically corral humanity for their own betterment in their eyes. Now, obviously, this is clearly, you know, the means to the end kind of strategy, and the more you delve into the Assassin's Creed franchise, sometimes you'll find out that both of these organizations are actually closer to each other than they are actually opposed. But of course, you have to play the entire franchise to really get that level of nuance. For now, Assassin's Creed 2 is a sequel that kind of built upon this cliffhanger ending that Assassin's Creed 1 had, where you were effectively confined to your room, and you were able to see crazy schizo writing all over the walls, covering multiple conspiracies and whatnot. So Assassin's Creed 2 starts off with this crazy bang. So you escape this facility Abstergo, where you're held against your will, and you join the modern-day Assassins, where in order to get trained up and fight against the Templar threat, they put you into this device known as the Animus, where you relive the lives of Ezio Auditore da Firenze, your actual ancestor. And through reliving his life in this crazy Animus, you develop the ability to actually get their skills and implement them into the modern day. It's like actually going through like decades of training in a matter of days. How is that possible? Through some crazy effect known as the bleeding effect, where the more and more you put yourself into the actual Animus device, the more and more you become in tune with your ancestor. And if you use the device too much, well, eventually you don't even need the Animus to relive the past, because every personality bleeds into each other and causes you to go completely fucking insane. Now, if any of this blew you away by any imagination, this is actually the story to Assassin's Creed, like in a nutshell. Now, Assassin's Creed 2 is one of those stories where, like, it's very much a revenge-focused story, and that's kind of how it starts, but it very quickly bleeds beyond all of it, with conspiracies, where once Ezio's family, or realistically his dad and his brothers are murdered, he escapes with his mom and his, like, sister. They go to this village named Monteriggioni, and while he thinks he can escape, he gets dragged into this crazy conspiracy where he's going to hunt Templar after Templar after Templar after Templar. Now, I'm not going to be doing a story review of Assassin's Creed 2. This isn't the video for that. It's a, part of an overarching topic. But I will be going over the ending of Assassin's Creed 2. But, I think it's very important. This game is also really old. And even if you do see the ending, I have a firm belief that you probably want to play the entire game because it's just that outlandish. The story for these, first, series of video games in the Assassin's Creed franchise are pretty nice. And obviously, towards the tail end, when you get to, the Valhalla series, you start to get towards the current day Assassin's Creed stuff, the story is definitely, I would say, equivalent to throwing shit at a board and seeing what sticks, because I don't think there's any cohesion anymore left. Usually they'll start a plot thread and forget about it in the next game, or that plot thread may get shifted to a comic or a TV show or a movie or whatever fucking other piece of media they have. No, Assassin's Creed 2 does not play around with its story. From a gameplay perspective, just to go over, the sequel absolutely added in all of these, points and side activities in a mini map to do in the actual Ubisoft map screen that people like to talk about really was bred here. You got side objectives, you've got side assassinations, races, you've even got your own town that you'll periodically be going back to invest money in, and then as you play the game, you'll be getting more and more money flowing in. So it's kind of like a clicker game, something like Adventure Capitalist, where I really love this stuff. I really love playing a video game where I feel like I invest money into something and I can do meaningful content, while a lot of the grinding stuff, like acquiring money for items, is usually done in a background process that I can just dip into, so I can stay more focused on meaningful content and upgrade periodically. I do enjoy games where I feel like the world feels alive in that manner, and I'm actually contributing to something that balloons in of its own way and becomes a gameplay loop in of itself. But the wildest thing about Assassin's Creed 2 and early, or at least this era of Ubisoft writing, was they really weren't afraid to go after some really touchy subjects. Part of Assassin's Creed 2's discussion into the Assassins and Templars is painting the Templars as a modern day Illuminati. So as you're playing this game, you'll find numerous glyphs, which are these encrypted programs in the actual game world that as you come into contact with them will throw you into a puzzle where you'll actually encounter some really, really, really wild conspiracies. So I'm going to leave one completely playing for you just to have you understand how weird this shit can get.
He wanted everyone to know the secret, to set us all free. They used it to drive him insane.
Okay, so we're going to pause it over here and go over just this crazy insanity you've seen. So in this letter to Mr. Edison, written from Henry Ford, it says, "Thank you for letting me use PE4, which Piece of Eden 4 is again one of the pieces of technology, a precursor tech, much like the Animus that's used to gain control." But of course, if you go into it, yes, they are in fact referring to Hitler. H has it. So I assume the war will begin as soon as he can take over. We'll let him have his fun. Lord knows that kind of purge will be good for Europe. Yeah, Henry Ford was a pretty known anti-Semite, and, Assassin's Creed wasn't afraid to shy away from touchy conspiracy theories. And if you think this is the only thing that's wild, this isn't even the scariest shit that I had to see. I have a real knack for playing these moments in video games late at night. There was one moment where, you literally have to deal with a blood-curdling scream as you play, and I'm sure anybody who's played Assassin's Creed 2 knows what I'm talking about. There are plenty of these conspiracy moments. They touch upon things like the moon landing, you name it, whatever. It's wild stuff. And unfortunately, this is not a part of Assassin's Creed anymore, this interesting, lore building that they do with the modern day intertwined with this controlling organization known as the Templars. And, that's not the only crazy part about this game. Not modern titles don't really even touch upon wild insanity. Like Assassin's Creed 2's end sequence, and again, full spoilers, has you breaking into the Vatican to have a fist fight with the Pope, who then takes you to an underground vault inside the Vatican that contains the memory of a precursor technologically advanced race of people that have exposed that they basically created humanity as a slave race, and there's an impending disaster that will kill everyone unless we follow their directives. Guys, this is a franchise that makes even the main character go, what the actual fuck? And that is the kind of writing, that is the kind of Ubisoft magic that I feel if they kept going to this modern day, we wouldn't have to read about bankruptcies. This is before the era of live services, battle passes. When you talk about inspirations and lots of companies borrowing off of the Ubisoft model, this is the game they're copying off of, an actual successful, addictive, really good game that I feel like anybody, even the most staunch critics of Ubisoft, can agree this is a pretty damn good time. This is a pretty peak era of the company. And now they're a fucking shadow of themselves. So one of the most addictive things about the Ubisoft open world, and one of the reasons why I believe Assassin's Creed 2 is the best Ubisoft game, and probably the game that might have even steered them in a direction that has thrown them into some serious hot waters, is because this model actually was addictive and very fun when it came out. To give you an idea, Assassin's Creed 2, or rather this entire trilogy, if I added up all the time it took me to play these games through, you're looking at around 65 hours of actual gameplay. That is 65 hours I spent basically finishing 3 games with the majority of its side content. Not all the actual hidden collectible items, but a majority of the side content that I feel most people, if you're immersed in something, are gonna play. Now if I compare this to Assassin's Creed Valhalla, 85 hours put into the game, and still I've only completed it, according to my PlayStation 4, about 80% of the way through. Basically, this should show you the amount of bloat that's in a modern Ubisoft RPG versus a game that's more specifically curated for content. Now you might wonder, well Moody, aren't you getting less content for $60 at the time versus something now? I would say, yeah, of course I'm getting less content, but the content is actually completely meaningful. Now, if you play a modern day Ubisoft open world, especially Assassin's Creed, something in Valhalla that really annoys me is a lot of the side quest stuff. For instance, if you go to a side quest in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, the side quest lasts about no more than a few minutes. And realistically, they don't really have a whole lot of implications to your characters. And the only reason you would do them is to increase your in-game power level so you can do, more, the focused content later on in the game. It's basically padding out game length by making you do monotonous shit when you could be doing actual fun stuff. And that's where Assassin's Creed 2 shines. Now, Star Wars Outlaws is another Ubisoft open world game which follows that single player model with tons of content, side content, and compared to something like Assassin's Creed 2, it's clearly much larger in scope. Not only is it visually better, obviously, because of the time difference of its releases, but it's also much larger because of the content that it gives you. It probably has, I would say, 2 to 3, maybe 4 times the amount of side content that Assassin's Creed 2 has. But even according to a developer update that Ubisoft has provided, one interesting keynote that came out was around the Canto Fathia Racing section, where they said, here's a little secret. To this day, no one has acquired their own Fathier. To unlock this, players need to complete dedicated short quests scattered around these betting stations. This will reveal an additional quest that brings Kay back to Toshara for a special opportunity. Now, I don't think that nobody is playing this game. I just think that this content was probably so meaningless or so uninteresting, and it was probably filled with so much bullshit anyways, that nobody decided to go down this road if this statement from the developers is true, because that is wild. Normally in a video game, I'm pretty sure somebody has unlocked, something. There's always a YouTube guide for anything in a video game. So this is a rather alarming metric that shows that even with the effort that they're putting into these games, sometimes it means literally nothing because nobody is actually engaging with the content. And maybe that has more to say about the quality of that content versus it just even existing. Maybe if the focus was lessened, we wouldn't have to have these crazy bloated budgets in these video games, and we could have more focused experiences that wouldn't be 7 out of 10s, but rather be actual 10 out of 10 experiences, which Ubisoft is very capable of making still to this day if they really try. Now, there's been a lot of talk about the company actually going through a bankruptcy in 2025, and I only found really one article about it that really talks about, again, Ubisoft's financial reports. They bring up their stock information, which again, it's, if you look at the actual Ubisoft stock, guys, 80% lost over the last 5 years is certainly not a healthy sign, and you don't have to be like a financial genius to kind of see the writing on the wall. But as far as I understand, there is no auditor that has jumped in and basically said that it's going to happen. And a company like Ubisoft is actually so large with so many IPs that at the end of the day, even if they're at the verge of bankruptcy, they're probably going to get bailed out by a company like Tencent, where their IPs are really what's going to be grabbing the interest of any purchasing party. So if somebody wants to grab, I don't know, the Splinter Cell IP and make a gacha game out of it, they have the full clearance to. At some point, they can pick this shit up for bargain bin prices and go to town. This is the actual fear that I guess some would have for Ubisoft. There is a weird conspiracy somewhere that apparently the family behind Ubisoft is intentionally driving it to the ground to purchase it for cheap, which again, it makes no real business sense because at the end of the day, the games that they are producing are not games that are hitting with the actual market, okay? Assassin's Creed Shadow is going through its own controversies, and I'm sure when it comes out, it'll probably be one of those games that will become a topic of the culture war where people will fight and argue, no, it's actually a really great game, or, oh my god, it's a pile of shit, when it's probably most likely going to be another 7 out of 10 Ubisoft game, and for real fans of the Assassin's Creed franchise, it probably won't be anything crazy special, right? But as far as Assassin's Creed fans are considered, guys, this is such a long-running franchise that people jump on and off this boat at any given vector, so it's insane. But beyond all of it, let's look at some other games that Ubisoft has kind of made that haven't done so well. Games like XDefiant. Now, XDefiant is a game that launched very recently, and actually when you fire it up now, you'll be greeted with a nice little message that says they're shutting down sometime around June of 2025. And the reality of this is even though when this game came out and it was pretty successful on Twitch for about the week of its release, this wasn't going to ever dethrone Call of Duty. And again, it was another example of Ubisoft chasing this live service model. Now, when you fire up a game like XDefiant, it becomes readily apparent that this is more of an iterative release of a Call of Duty title than something completely unique. It's not that Ubisoft doesn't have popular live services. Rainbow Six Siege is a pretty good example. However, Rainbow Six Siege actually has a unique gameplay loop, a gameplay system that I don't think other games are easily replicating. Although even my interest in Rainbow Six Siege is absolutely minimal these days, a game like XDefiant is something that I can only play for a maximum of 1 hour if I wanted to, because it's just not that gripping. The game is kind of like a mishmash of all these other various factions in the Tom Clancy and the Ubisoft universe. So you've got, Ghost Recon operators standing next to Assassin's Creed operators. You've got some abilities. You've got some guns. You've got netcode that barely works. You've got a game that feels like something out of the PlayStation 3 generation, somehow slinking into the PlayStation 5. When in reality, this game is dated upon its release, and it was dated for a game that would have released even for 2013 standards, for crying out loud. And of course, this is a game that probably had so little of a player base and so little of whales purchasing the microtransactions that at this point it's better for Ubisoft to just throw in the towel and completely forget this dog shit exists. But when it comes to making money, their next example, in my opinion, is probably the worst example we're going to be looking at, and that is the NFT games that Ubisoft has released. In fact, one released, I think, about a week ago from me recording this video. So let's watch that one. So, introducing Captain Laserhawk the game. Now, if you're looking very closely, you might recognize Rayman, a pretty popular Ubisoft character that, well, has pretty much only been brought back to sell NFT slop. Now, NFT gaming or Web3 gaming is basically a venture that Ubisoft has, as far as I understand, only ever lost money in. But if you look closely into it, you can purchase one of these 10,000 IDs that will transform you into a Niji, a brave warrior of Eden. So again, insert whatever ChatGPT version of the game you want, but generally speaking, this is the game. It is a NFT project, which again, if you look very carefully into it, you can play it actually right now. To play it, you need the Ubisoft Connect launcher, and you'll need a valid Niji warrior card. So again, a valid Niji Warrior card effectively is an NFT game. So again, to do it, you can purchase an ID card right here off of a group known as Magic Eden IO. And of course, you can see that these are the actual IDs that you can buy. Some of them are gold, some of them are, purple, some of them are basic commons. I think you all understand how NFTs work by now if you've watched my channel. So for instance, if you click on this one NFT, you'll find that this Skillful Lemon, right, is they've got some stats, they've got some things going on. And of course, if you look very closely at the top, which is more interesting to me, you can see this is clearly what Ubisoft is going for. In the last 24 hours as of recording this video, there have been 79 sales, with an average sale equaling 0.0035 Ethereum. In fact, the 24-hour volume for all of these trades, so the 24-hour volume becomes pretty important in this situation, 0.274 Ethereum. Now, if we look up how much 0.274 Ethereum to, let's say, USD is, that's $3,337 worth of actual trading activity that has gone on. Now, obviously, the important part about these blockchains is really who is the actual person running this, and are they possibly grabbing a fee off of it. But really, it's not so much the money that Ubisoft could be making. Any percentage of 3,337 is a literal negligible amount to a multinational like Ubisoft or anybody that they're partnering with. No, in reality, what this should show you is that with 79 sales, yes, it may have 3,159 owners, but it clearly shows that this kind of game isn't being adopted. Now, I'm going to show you what the gameplay looks like, courtesy of a channel known as Skill Gaming here, and it is pretty much an expose into how shit these NFT games really are. So this looks like a Flash game, a Shockwave game, that somehow is being sold by one of the largest gaming publishers in the fucking planet. And if you think that this is somehow a Web3 game or the future because you can exchange NFT and warrior characters around, you're a fucking simpleton. This is not what gaming should be about. This is not, nothing in this game requires the fucking blockchain in any capacity. The blockchain simply exists to satiate some crypto bros that Ubisoft thinks are going to turn into whales, and they can have the next crypto game on their hand that they can make hundreds of millions of dollars off of. In reality, they are pimping out some of their most beloved fan bases to create trash like this. I started this video off talking about Assassin's Creed 2 in a game that literally grips me to this day. And this is the exact opposite of the kind of game that Ubisoft should be making. They literally could pump out those Assassin's Creed 2s, smaller quality, scale games, high quality, instead of this goddamn trash. and be making far more money. We wouldn't have to talk about Ubisoft going bankrupt or Ubisoft failing. But if these are the kind of games that Ubisoft wants to produce, they 100% deserve every bit of failure that is at their fucking doorstep. The best way to kind of end this whole situation on is one that really personally hits me if you watch my content. One of Ubisoft's quotes was, "One of the things we saw is that gamers are used to, a little bit like DVD, having and owning their games. And that's a consumer shift that needs to happen," he said. They get comfortable not owning their CD collections or DVD collections. That's a transformation that's been a bit slower to happen. So it's about feeling comfortable with not owning your games. And the reality is Ubisoft, in a long term, wants to make games as a service, products that they sell licenses to that people connect in and then purchase other things through them, right? They want to create multiple like storefronts in a way. They want Assassin's Creed to be one game that you buy, and then you buy things within that game, as they do with Ghost Recon or Far Cry or anything. And maybe this is the path for them to create subscription services and billions of dollars. But realistically, as a games company, it is not smart to take away the ownership of such a prized product from actual gamers. Remember, video games are not like movies and music, okay? In that their preservation is, I would say, far simpler. A lot of these games are caked with DRM. A lot of them are caked with forced online connectivity that may or may not be disabled as a game is moved out of its lifespan. Even in Ubisoft games, games like The Crew are lost forever because Ubisoft simply doesn't feel like they should maintain these games for access, especially when they're out of service. Games that you pay $60 for, by the way. Whereas you can watch movies that have been in the public domain or movies that have been released in the 30s, even to this day through archives and efforts preserved, by actual people and patrons of that craft. Things about like video games and Ubisoft and the way they treat these kind of games shows that their ideas, shows that the mentality of the company needs to either shift pretty dramatically or this company needs to go under, because really Ubisoft, in my opinion, owns a lot of IPs that I feel would probably be better left, in the hands of, other companies that actually care about making video games as opposed to making, just literal live service product. Now, at the end of all of this, I started this video off with Assassin's Creed and my real love for one of Ubisoft's most iconic games. A game that I believe may have spiraled this company into producing the rest of their games in a similar fashion. And then, of course, their love for live service slowly pushing them towards a era of video gaming that is never going to be the healthiest. Look, other video game companies and publishers produce absolute live service trash as well. But their games are not necessarily of trash quality. Ubisoft games are like bargain bin breakfast cereals that you buy at a grocery store. They're serviceable, they do well, but generally speaking, if you're somebody in this market, and especially in this market, if you can just buy the regular stuff, the official stuff, you probably will go down that road. And in Ubisoft's case, that analogy makes no sense because for a company that is so willing to sell $60 to $70 games, there just appears to be no reason that you should go down their avenue of purchasing games when other publishers and other, titles exist with far better quality. Games like Skull and Bones are so embarrassing because when you look at the gameplay for them, like for instance, even if you look at the shipboarding mechanics of this pirate MMO that they've made, shows you just how much Ubisoft doesn't get it. You see, you play a game like this, and basically hijacking a ship amounts to nothing more than a menu screen. When on the Nintendo Switch, you could literally play Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag right now and get far more impressive gameplay by fighting in the open seas, boarding ships, and absolutely being a fucking pirate in a game they released at this point, I would say a decade, maybe a little over a decade ago. It's actually insane how much Ubisoft literally does no effort into releasing good, even quadruple A slop, when literally, without even thinking, they produce some of the best games, some of the most memorable games about a decade ago. Games that people literally iterate from, other companies will be willing to steal from. But is it that Ubisoft is incapable of this now? Obviously not. I think they very much can make an amazing game. The teams are still there. It's just the upper, tier at Ubisoft, the, actual executives, the managers, the people running the company are more interested in live service shit and taking away the, consumer ownership of these games rather than actually producing the fucking good game to begin with. You know, they could probably make literal truckloads of cash if instead they pulled back the scale of some of their IPs and produced quality titles versus just trying to make everything another live service marketplace. But maybe the company needs to fail so these IPs can be freed up and hopefully good games can come out. Because Ubisoft of today is just not a company that resembles Ubisoft of even yesteryears. Or even like a few years ago, if I'm going to be completely honest. Fuck Ubisoft, and fuck this company for even existing as long as it has. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Just like it if you dislike it, I am out.